So since I've been making videos speaking more on my faith and why I believe in God, etc., I've been receiving a lot of questions, and I see a lot of questions in the comment. And instead of going one by one, responding to all the common questions, I wanted to take 5 of the most asked questions and then attack it from a scientific standpoint and also from an archaeological standpoint. And I also know when debating or having a conversation with an atheist or a person who does not necessarily share in the faith, it can be very useless to quote scripture or use the Bible. Therefore, that's why I want to make this video as scientific and as archaeological as possible. And of course, in the end, I'll give my spiritual stance on it. So with no credit to myself, but that of the Holy Spirit, I hope by the end of this video, those questions are answered. This is a safe space, a safe environment to have these kind of discussions. I just ask that we are going to be reasoning together using a lot of logic. Please refrain from feeling any kind of way or upset. This is all coming from love. And just to let you guys know, I wasn't always a strong person in the faith. So I understand these questions. A lot of these questions were questions that I had myself. And it took me being very open-minded, being open to learning new things, etc., to understand. So please be respectful in the comments, be open-minded, and let's just have a good time and really reason together and have a decent conversation. You don't necessarily have to agree with me, and I don't have to agree with you for us to still respect and love each other, okay? But before we get into that, first, hey friend, welcome to my channel, Karina Elude Mental Gems. This channel is dedicated to leveling up in all areas of your life. So let us learn together, read together, but most importantly, grow together. Now, without further ado, let's get into this video. Let's start first with question 1, and I have my handy dandy file here that I'm looking to. The question is, there is no evidence of a God. The theory of evolution is real. So for a lot of people that believe in science and that believe that science shows that there is no God and they believe in the theory of evolution, it can be very difficult to have a conversation about creation, about the Sabbath, about being one God that created all of mankind and everything that you see today. With everything like the evolution theory, the Big Bang theory, everything is essentially a theory. Science have not given no definite explanation as to how did we get here. They have not given no definite explanation. It has all been theories. And what is the definition of a theory? So a theory is defined as a supposition or a system of ideas intended to explain something, especially one based on general principles, independent of the thing to be explained. So theories is just a set of ideas with a lot of scholars. Yes, they're learned, they went to school, they educated themselves to get to this point, but it's just a set of ideas. It's not necessarily fact. Any theory that you get is just that, a theory. One of the first evidence of the creation of God for me, aside from logic, which we'll get into in a little bit, was the Fibonacci sequence and just God's fingerprint in creation and how he has his fingerprint in everything that is created. The very fingerprint that is unique to the human, God has his own fingerprint, and it is seen through creation.
Individuality, the trademark of any artist, designer, or architect. Each desires a uniqueness to their creation. Man naturally has this individuality, his fingerprint. There are 6.5 billion people on the face of the earth, and no 2 fingerprints are the same. Around 1200 AD, a man named Leonard Pisano, better known as Fibonacci, discovered a sequence of numbers that created a very interesting pattern. The sequence begins with the numbers 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, and continues indefinitely. Each number is obtained by adding the last 2 digits together. A rectangle with a length and width of any 2 of the numbers of this sequence forms what is known as the golden rectangle, a perfect rectangle. A golden rectangle can be broken down into squares the size of the next Fibonacci numbers down and below. If we were to take a perfect or golden rectangle, break it down into smaller squares based on Fibonacci's sequence, and divide each with an arc, the patterns begin to take shape. We begin to see Fibonacci's spiral. The spiral in and of itself is insignificant. Its importance is revealed in where we find it. Take, for example, the sunflower. The display of its florets are in perfect spirals of 55, 34, and 21, the sequence of Fibonacci. As currents move through the ocean, the waves that bring in the tide curve into a spiral that can be mathematically diagrammed onto a plot at the points 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, and 55. The fruitlets of the pineapple create the same spiral based on the sequence. The pine cone does the same. Buds on trees, sand dollars, starfish, petals on flowers, and especially the nautilus shell are formed with this exact same blueprint. This blueprint can be seen around us on a small scale every day, but the greatest example of all is directly above our heads. Even the spiral of the galaxies above us are formed with the exact design that the tiny shell is formed. This sequence or blueprint appears to be the trademark of a designer, a proof of a creator, something left behind indicating the one who was there, a fingerprint. As we scan our universe from the tiny flower to the awe-inspiring galaxy, we see the fingerprint of God.
As you know, Mother Nature uses all kinds of mathematical languages. When we go to understand physical phenomena, we generally find that there's some sort of mathematical underpinning for whatever the phenomena is.
How did we end up in a universe like that?
And it turns out, in fact, all of our senses appear to rely on sort of Fourier transforms, that they all seem to use the same mathematics. So again, here's evidence that the brain uses the same mathematics to decipher the sensory world as are involved in the making of a hologram, which is, as I say, not proof, but compelling evidence that something is going on there.
As you go deeper and deeper into reality, mathematics becomes the only way to describe reality.
There's a conspiracy to hide this information that DNA is a Fibonacci of this number or entity ratio sequence called the golden ratio. The ratio that proves the existence of intelligent design, or the reality of intelligent design of the cosmos. I mean, if you go to the golden ratio site for Wikipedia too on the same theme, they don't mention any of this stuff in nature that we're going to talk about here, that we talked about on the show 2 days ago, and that we're talking about here. They talk about how it's found in architecture and math and all this kind of stuff. They don't discuss it, how it's found in the measurements of the human arm. Why not? It's just, I mean, well, I think that's the point here. I think that just made sense to me, thinking this through as I say it to you. It has to be a conspiracy. How could all this be overlooked, and how could Wikipedia leave it out? There has to be somehow that big money has pushed their influence somehow, and they've had a drive to keep this covered up or something. These can't all be coincidences. And since they're doing that with everything else, it has to be the case that there's some movement to keep this stifled. I mean, why isn't, and here's another piece to add to this. Why isn't this in our education system? We learn all this junk geometry, pea-brain stuff when we take geometry in high school, and they don't teach you about any of this, the golden ratio everywhere in nature. I went through elementary school, high school, college, undergrad degree in college, master's degree, and halfway through PhD, and never was any of this mentioned. We know who controls the universities, the big money behind it, all the way up to the Illuminati Nephilim controllers. So this can't be, this is planned. Okay. Got to be a conspiracy. I mean, we could keep going compiling the evidence. It would just all lead to it. So, and if we could keep compiling evidence of it being a conspiracy, I mean, everything points towards the universities and education, government controlled education system absolutely covers it up. You see how, everything's falling in the same direction, so when everything, all these conclusions point to the same direction, that it's covered up and hidden.
The geometry, the structure of nature is designed on the basis of what is called fractal geometry. And fractal geometry is unique geometry, not the one we learned in school. The geometry we did learn in school called Euclidean geometry, you can't model nature with it. All those triangles, cones, cubes, and spheres are not what nature really looks like. And we now recognize this new geometry that really came into our world in 1983 with the work of Benoit Mandelbrot from IBM called fractal geometry. And it's a different version of geometry, and it's very exciting. But here's the fundamental key characteristic of this geometry. Built into the nature of the mathematics is a reality that images of the structure repeat themselves in a very self-similar fashion at any level of the organization that you're talking about. So if you want to talk about cells or people or civilizations, they're all built on the same geometry. But the key word for most people to understand is that this geometry links an ancient mystical understanding. There was a phrase that people are familiar with, as above, so below. Well, with this new geometry, that becomes mathematical and scientific as a reality.
Every atom is a mini black hole, that it has infinite density, that it has infinite potential, that everything has singularity at its center.
That's why I can study the nature of a cell and understand the nature of a human, because a human is a fractal image of a cell. We're made out of cells. We're just a large version of a cell. And so that a human body turns out not to be a one thing as we see it in the mirror, but when we really understand, if you could see it with microscopic eyes so you could see what it looked like, you recognize that a human body is a community of upwards to 50 trillion cells. Every cell is essentially a miniature human. Because virtually every cell has every function that I have in my body. It's already present. As a matter of fact, any function that I do with my body is only because a cell can do that function because I'm made out of cells.
The world of physics and the world in general is transforming, and that there's an opening that's occurring. And certainly in physics, there's a level of arrogance that's slowly fading away. Not so long ago when I started in bringing my work to the physics community some 15 to 20 years ago, the tendency was to think we've got the universe pretty well all figured. And so there was a lot of, arrogance in the way, physicists were interacting with new ideas and so on. And so it was extremely difficult to be heard. A lot of failures in our theories have come forward. A lot of experiments in laboratory and have shown us that there's anomalies that we cannot explain with the standard model, and all sorts of things are coming up, certain level of failure of string theory and so on. And I think that's changed the world of physics.
Next, of course, for me is that when you do look around and then you see the earth, that we live in, when you look at the water and the seas and the diversity of animals. I love to watch nature shows and nature documentaries simply for that. I am in awe all the time of God's creation. I am just amazed and blown away at the diversity of different birds, the diversity of even butterflies, the diversity of ants. There's different types of butterflies out there. There's just not one set of butterflies. The diversity of cats, from the lion to the tiger to the cheetah to the panther to the leopard. You guys know how much I love big cats. If you're on my Instagram page, I always post a big cat at the end of every slide photo that I do. I'm obsessed with them, and I do believe that in heaven, I will just be surrounded by those big cats, playing with them, etc. I just love them. But God has different varieties of them, each with their own unique set of personalities and their own makeup. And even with humans, look at the diversity in humans, the diversity in plants and trees and herbs, right? When you look at the makeup of creation, just to look at the tree from the roots grow up in the bark. If you look at the tree bark of several trees, they can look the same. They can have similarity in terms of their roots and barks, right? Even though they're different. But once you start looking at the branch, a tiny seed from a branch of a tree that has roots from the ground creates the mango. You can get the mango from the branch of a tree, or canepas, which is one of those things that I just love to eat, from a branch. The banana tree, just a tiny branch will come out and grow. And then there you see there's a banana growing onto it. And then that same mango, that same banana has all the nutrients, in it that we need for the human body. Or even the coconut. Coconut water is the most hydrating water that you can drink, right? And we use coconut oil. We use it for cooking. We use the coconut plant in Haiti, where I was from, in Lagunab. We use the whole coconut tree down to the roots, everything, right? No part of it is wasted. We used it to braid into making homes, etc. None of it goes wasted. And to just imagine how something was placed in this soil to grow and to nourish and be useful to humans, that's not an accident. That's not a big bang to me. That logically just doesn't make sense, other than there was a divine creator who made it so that the very earth, the minerals and the salt that is in the earth fits perfectly with the roots of the tree to create these foods that is going to be nourishment to our bodies. Even the very concept of water, we cannot explain it. You can have all the ingredients for water and still cannot create it. That's because it was made by God and it nourishes us. We cannot survive without it. And this is why Jesus said he is the living water. You just cannot survive without it. The concept of it. Above us is water. Below us, beneath us, all around us. It's just that concept that I can talk to you right now, breathing, moving my hands and talking and blinking and thinking thoughts so that they can come out of my mouth all at the same time without putting too much effort in it. How is that not a complex design that right now I am thinking, and in the midst of thinking, my hands is moving with my thoughts. I can smile, I can talk, I can think of tomorrow, have a vision, images pop up into my head, all at the same time, breathing and blinking while my stomach is still digesting, my heart is still pumping without putting any thought into it. Is that not God? Is that not a divine being that put all of this together? Logically, science cannot explain that. And I do believe that science, all it is man trying to understand creation. And men trying to understand creation is men trying to understand the creator, God. But it has been distorted, and that is very unfortunate.
It's the Big Bang Theory. So this theory tries to give a naturalistic view on the origin of things. The idea is that at some stage, everything that we see in the universe out there was concentrated in one particular point. And then at some stage, whatever was there exploded and shot out into a vast universe, expanding at breathtaking speed. And we see that this universe today is still expanding. Now, if the universe is expanding, then it's easy to extrapolate backwards and to say, well, if it's expanding now, that means it must have been closer together in the past. Now, I'd also like to point out that there are approximately 125,000 million galaxies, each with some 200,000 million plus suns. And the distances are so vast that we cannot even imagine them in every single direction. So really, it seems as if we are a tiny, insignificant spot somewhere lost in space. Psalms 8, verse 3, 4, and 9 says, "When I consider thy heavens, the work of thy fingers, the moon and the stars, which thou hast ordained, what is man that thou art mindful of him? O Lord, our Lord, how excellent is thy name in all the earth." So the heavens are supposed to tell us something about the magnificence of God. Now, if you look out there into space, you will see huge concentrations of stars. And this is basically a problem. You see, if the universe was at any stage contracted onto an infinitesimal point, and it then exploded, poof, and spread out into the vastness of space, then you would expect that this matter would be uniformly distributed. This is called the cosmological principle. Uniform distribution of all that there exists in this vast universe. But you don't see that. In actual fact, what you see is a concentration of material in clusters and groups in various places. What you see is spiraling galaxies, huge galaxies and super galaxies clustered together, spiraling around each other. And you would not expect that. You would expect a uniform distribution of matter. In actual fact, you wouldn't expect anything. Because if there was an explosion of first energy, which later materialized into matter, there would be equal quantities of matter and antimatter, which would destroy each other. And so basically a universe should consist only of energy. You alone are the Lord. You made the heavens, even the highest heavens and all the starry host, the seas and all that is in them. You give life to everything, and the multitudes of heaven worship you. This is in total contrast to a naturalistic idea of origin. So according to the Big Bang Theory, the universe was created between 10 and 20 billion years ago from the random cosmic explosion. The observable universe could have evolved from an infinitesimal region. That means a dot. Maybe smaller than a dot, maybe some conjecture smaller than the size of an atom. It is then tempting to go one step further and speculate that the entire universe evolved from literally nothing, that everything was concentrated in a dot, exploded, and this explosion came from nothing and created everything. As the professor of astrophysics at Nottingham University admits, we're lost. The foundations of the Big Bang model would crumble away. We'd be left with no explanation for the Big Bang or galaxy formation or the distribution of galaxies in the universe. So there are scientists who are saying, why is this matter not uniformly distributed? The Big Bang also violates the law of conservation of angular momentum. Now let me explain that. You see, everything is turning around. When you look at our solar system, the planets are moving around the stars. The moons are moving around the planets. Everything is moving in circles. If there was an explosion sometime in the past from a center, and this explosion went poof in every single direction, then whatever shot out from there shot out in straight lines in every single direction. But that's not what we see. You see, we see angular momentum, not linear momentum. We see everything going round and round and round and round. So now the question is, how come it's going round and round instead of the other way around? So the idea then came to mind, well, there is one possibility that could explain why everything is going round and round. Maybe that original dot was also going round and round. Does that make sense? Now, if you can imagine a bunch of kids sitting on one of those merry-go-round things in a fun park, and this thing is going round and 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 round at speed. If that thing happened to go so fast that the kids a lot later hang on and centrifuge to the outside, and then go so fast that the kids actually lose their hold and go flying off, then the law of the maintenance of angular momentum says that they will be spinning while they fly off in the same direction as the object was spinning originally. So if it was going clockwise, then they will spin off clockwise. Does that make sense? So that can explain why everything is going round and round. Amos 5 verse 8 says, "Seek him that makes the Pleiades and Orion." It's interesting that it names these two star systems. And the Pleiades, or the Seven Sisters, is what is known as a bound cluster. That's very fascinating. Can you bind the chains of Pleiades? Can you keep them together? Which is what science has recently discovered, that it in fact is a bound cluster. That means the gravity within the system is equal to the force that wants to separate them, so it stays together. In contrast, loose the cords of Orion. The systems in the belt of Orion are flying apart at breathtaking speed. Fascinating that that should be in Job 38, verse 31. But the general principle is that things seem to be moving apart and moving round and round, sometimes in intricate patterns. But the problem is the globular clusters and the concentration of the matter in the universe, which should be uniformly distributed, but is not. Even Einstein recognized this problem and came up eventually with ideas to counter it, but they're theoretical and not practical solutions. So advocates of the Big Bang Theory propose that the singularity, that little dot, blew up and the Big Bang was spinning before it exploded. Thus, everything within it was spinning as it flung out. But now there's a problem. However, some galaxies, some planets, for example, Venus, Uranus, Pluto, many moons are spinning backwards. That's called retrograde motion. It's going the wrong way around. Some moons even have a retrograde orbit around the planet, going the wrong way. Some are going this way and some are going the other way. Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune have moons orbiting in both directions. Now, this is a serious problem. Here's a galaxy called NGC 4622, which appears to be rotating in the opposite direction. The whole galaxy going the other way.
In terms of the theory of evolution and things like that, I do not believe in the theory of evolution. I don't believe in evolution. And that is a very controversial thing to say, especially in this society. And that can get you canceled, terminated. A lot of scientists that have spoken out, and even archaeologists, etc., they have been taken out of here. Their lives were ended. They were shunned, their degrees stripped of them. And there's just this hate for them for speaking out against the theory of evolution. And I'll hope to share some clips of Professor Walter Bates, which I love his topics on the theory of evolution, just from a professional scientific standpoint as a Christian. But I understand YouTube doesn't really like his videos too much. So hopefully you can see this as the next clip. If not, then the links are all in the description of every video that I posted on here, every source that I use. The links are in the description so that you can check it out. And I hope you can understand this.
Here's the dawn of man. And we are told that man lived in the trees and then came down from the trees because the climate changed or whatever, and we started getting grassland. And then the creatures walking there between the grass had to adapt to the new environment. So they stood on their hind legs to peer over the top, and eventually they started walking upright, because that would be what we call Lamarckism. That means an animal starts doing what it does because it wants to achieve a certain state. Modern humans look like this, and the world would like us to constantly be reminded where we come from. How Man Began was a Time magazine article not too long ago. And notice again the scratches and the blood. Why? Because it shows his primitive nature. We did not come from the monkeys. Science teaches that the monkeys and man are end products of an evolutionary process. They are all there together. The ancestor of both of them is somewhere lower down. And, of course, they were arboreal. They lived in the trees. So the climate changed and the trees started disappearing and they started coming down. And when they were up there in the trees, they were perfectly happy with their bananas and their leaves and the things that they eat. And man and the apes are end products of an evolutionary process. This comes from textbooks, which shows you that here there is no evidence. All the fossils that exist occur together with man at the same time. Nowhere do you find layers of the one and then the other and the other and the other. That's based on inference, however reasonable, not the evidence of the fossil. But they were all there at the same time. So the Australopithecines and the so-called hominid fossils and modern man all existed at the same time. So we have what we call a morphological sequence, not a paleontological sequence. If you look at these monkeys and you look at this man, they all live at the same time, but somehow they hope that the one retained features of something more primitive than the other. And science will tell you that if we compare our genes with a chimpanzee, well, we have 98% of genes in common with a chimpanzee, so we must be very much related, correct? The way in which we developed is not necessarily depicted by the genes, but by the expression of the gene. So you can get this very similar genes giving totally different structures. And by the way, we have just about as many genes in common with a mouse. And do you know that we have 76% of genes in common with a banana? So did we evolve from the banana? Did we? You see, don't be impressed by figures like 98%. It means absolutely nothing. It's actually scientific skullduggery. It is dishonest. When you go to the museum, you see the ape-like ancestors, so-called, sitting there around the campfire with their sticks that they started picking up to club this animal to death so that they had something to eat. But remember that all of these existed at the same time as modern man. And he says they walked upright, these Australopithecines, because we find footprints in stone. These footprints have been studied in great detail, and they are identical with human footprints made in mud by people walking barefoot. Did you know that they actually cheated to make some of these footprints, to change them, to show that the toe is offset when it wasn't? This is Johansen. He's the one who found the famous Lucy. And he says, well, she is the prime candidate. Lucy was tiny, and there are scientists today in the literature which say Lucy was nothing other than a pygmy chimp. But how do they depict Lucy in the museums? This is the Museum of Natural History in London. Notice the footprints again. Lucy walking there with a child on her. Is Lucy more closely related to humans than other Australopithecines? This question is what? Still unanswered. Partly because each kind of Australopithecine has unique features that could link it with human beings. Of course, they were contemporaneous with human beings. Human beings were already there, so this is no evidence of evolution. These were just ape. That skeleton, that's what they've got. Now, the head is 100% ape. The arm-to-leg ratio, they say, is midway between a human and an ape. Apes have a leg-to-arm ratio of about 1:1. That means the leg is as long as the arm. Humans have a leg-to-arm ratio of 1:0.75. So the arm is only 3/4 as long as the leg. Now, Johansen worked this out and said the ratio here is 1:0.87. There are pieces missing there, pieces missing there, pieces missing there, pieces missing there, all over the place. How does he work that out? How does he work that out? But by the way, Johansen is has a big problem, especially with me. Have you seen my arm? It's very, very long. So I must be some intermediate hominid. Some people just have long arms. I can't help it. He also says this hip over here tells us that she walked upright. Unfortunately, not with that one, because with this one, she actually walked like an ape. But he says this hip must be twisted. But of course, there is no other hip to compare it with. Can you see? So all we have is a hip that makes her walk like an ape. Now, why does he say it's twisted? Well, because of the knee. The knee, you see, is more like a human knee. That's the only piece of the fossil that is like a human. But do they tell you in the textbooks that they never found the knee with Lucy? No, they just added it for convenience. Now remember, man and apes were contemporaneous, yes or no? So what's the big deal with finding a human knee? Because in this area, we find humans and Australopithecines together. In Olduvai Gorge, you find evidence of human activity as well as these creatures. Sterkfontein is the group of caves in South Africa, in the Witwatersrand, and there these caves are. And there you find some interesting fossils. This is Robert Broom. He was actually one of the first biologists of the university where I did my undergraduate studies, Stellenbosch University. Very famous man. There he is with Jan Smuts. Great interest these gentlemen had in the origin of humans. And he found the famous Mispless fossil. Here's this famous skull of the Tong child found in South Africa in 1924, but it's an Australopithecine. And every now and then they find another piece of Australopithecus, and Time magazine rages and National Geographic goes berserk. Ho-hum, it's just another Australopithecine, it's an ape. Here it is, 22.6 million years old. Mrs. Pless. There she is. She's almost like a philosopher, right? And here they found Littlefoot. And Littlefoot, what was it? It was an ape foot with a toe offset. It wasn't human at all. This is nothing to get excited about. This is an ape. They will put the hips down and they will show you how the human hip evolved from a narrow hip to a wide hip. They'll put them down in sequence and say, look, here is evidence for evolution. Rubbish. Women today that bear children, do they measure the hip? Of course they measure it. Some women have narrow hips, some have wide hips. Some have such narrow hips that they cannot give birth naturally and they have to have a cesarean section. We have a huge variety of hip widths today, but if I took all the women's hips and lined them up, I'd have from narrow to wide. It's got nothing to do with evolution, that's variety. Just because it comes out of fossils doesn't make it anything else. Now, this particular type fossil actually was of an old man with bone diseases. In the past, perhaps people got older than today. Perhaps they did. Perhaps they lived a different lifestyle. What happens when we get old? Do we retain our youthful features or do they change? The bone grows and we get greater brow ridges. So older people, old skulls look totally different to young skulls. So these variations could just be simple variations in age and have nothing to do with evolution. And from a few fragments, you're going to reconstruct something like this from an old man who had rickets. There you have an Aborigine. Did you know that in the 1940s, you could get a license from the British High Commissioner in Australia, in the 1940s still, to hunt Aborigines on the grounds that they were evolutionary inferior organisms. Darwinism condemned them to death. Today, they will look like that when they have their rituals. Some of them are still living like that. Others look like that during their rituals, and during the week they will put on their suit and go and give classes at the universities where they are professors. That's very rapid evolution, wouldn't you say? If we would realize that the differences we have is variety, what would happen today if someone saw a lady walking with a chihuahua on his chain and walked up to the chihuahua and went squash? That's an evolutionary, ancient, inferior organism. A hue and cry like you cannot believe, because this is a highly advanced little pet creature. Or what if you did the same to a St. Bernard and said that's an evolutionary outcast, because it's different to the others? When each of them just reflects a variety within the gene pool, it's got nothing to do with evolution at all. We find some very interesting fossils of humans. These are Grauballer and Talent Man. We find them in tar pits. And some of these fossils are huge. Some are 2.5 meters tall. The thing's very different in the past to what they are today. We find some of these buried with gold trinkets. So obviously some of them were even sacrifices to sun deities or whatever. If we take a look at American fossils of Indians, for example, from graves, then even magazines that want to propagate evolution say it challenges our traditional model of hunter-gatherer societies that they have such intricately woven clothing which shows some form of technology. We have fossils of mummies, for example, and not a shred of evidence that anything really dramatic has changed. Use the most modern techniques, and then they'll put the flesh on it, and then they'll put the skin on it, and then they'll put the hair on it, and the looks on it, and you can see he looks like an idiot, right? He's supposed to be some ancient creature predating modern man. Now, forensic science is a perfect science and an exact science, but you have the whole skull, or you don't have a tooth, and then reconstruct the skull on the tooth and say, okay, this is what this beautiful woman looked like. Does it make any sense? No. You have a bone chip, and they reconstruct it to look like that. Did they know he had long hair from a bone chip? Of course not. This is what we are led to believe. On what evidence? None. Absolutely none. So this would be Adam and Eve. This is what they would look like. I asked the young people, help me out here. I'm an old geezer. Just help me out. Which are the coolest women in the world today? And they said, oh, Mariah Carey, Beyonce, and Avril Lavigne. I said, okay, there they are. There's Eve, as science says she looked like. Genesis 1 verse 27, so God created man in his own image, in the image of God created him, male and female created he them. Did Eve look like that? Or does this reflect a little bit of what Eve might have looked like? What do you think? The choice really is yours. Either we have a noble origin, or we come from the slime pit all the way through to modern man. Either we are sons of the Most High and daughters of the Most High, or Eve looked like that.
Now, even when you get to talk about the animals, for instance, the animals in watching nature documentaries, one thing that would always make me depressed and ask God, dang, this is so evil to see how a lion just kills a gazelle and do this and blah, blah, blah. It used to hurt my soul so much to witness in nature documentaries, to the point where It's getting harder and harder to witness, and I monitor even the nature documentary of what I watch to be not the killing part. It's very hard to watch. And I would have the conversation with God, like, why the animals are like this though? How did that come to be? It looks like so much evil, even amongst the animal kingdom. But we are the ones that destroyed the earth. And there is a Bible verse that said one day the Lord will destroy those who destroyed the earth. We have destroyed the earth, not just through sin, but also guys, there's so much information out here on how they have messed up the soil, the ecosystem, the atmosphere. We have destroyed the earth. We have stripped it of its resources and don't allow it to replenish. And that in turn has messed up the ecosystem for the animals. And this is a lot of the reason why the animals seem to be so cruel with each other. And in this clip, which I hope YouTube doesn't have a problem with, Walter Vaith explains it so perfectly.
A Russian scientist by the name of Dmitry Balayev studied the process of domestication of foxes. What he did is he took a number of foxes and then he started domesticating them. And he chose the offspring that were more at home with the humans. And then within a few generations, about 8 generations, he had some fox litters where the young ones would actually socialize with the human. And after about 13 generations, they were just like dogs. They would lie at the feet, they would ask for food when they were hungry, they would lick their handlers, and an amazing change took place in these creatures. When he analyzed the hormone levels, the adrenal glands had become smaller, adrenaline levels were lower, the animals were no longer as aggressive, and the serotonin levels in the brain rose by more than double. In schizophrenics, the serotonin levels are very low. So a psychiatrist will give an medication to increase the serotonin levels, and then the patient is calm. If the serotonin levels are low, then he's very violent. Social change in the animal. Was that evolution? Surely not. If you could change it just by selection of what the gene capacity was within just a few generations, that's not evolution. That's deactivation of some systems and activations of others to bring it more in line with what it was like original. If you take carnivores, here's a bear, that's classified as a carnivore, and here they will eat fish. But in the north, the salmon run is over very quickly. And fortunately for the bear, when the salmon run is on, it's just when the snow melts and there are no other food sources around. But what will the bear eat during the rest of the year? Berries and grasses and succulent grass. That's its diet. In fact, over 80%, sometimes 86% of a bear's diet will be green vegetation and berries. He's actually called a bear because he eats bears, singular for berries. Now, what if those seasonal changes that we have today did not exist? Would the bear ever have to eat anything else than the berries and the grasses and the foods that he has? Yes or no? Obviously not. So because he has the equipment to kill, does that mean he was designed to kill, yes or no? No. You have a panda bear. That's classified as a carnivore. What does it eat? Bamboo. That's its diet. Now, there were many different kinds of grasses in the past that don't exist today. Many kinds of cycads, many kinds of ferns that don't exist today. We find them only in the fossil record. Suddenly, a huge variety of foods is gone. What do the animals do if they have this problem? They either give up living or they change their lifestyle. And those that have the equipment to cope, those are the ones that survive. Here's a fish. Very interesting. If you look at a fish, you'll see that it has a urinary bladder, intestines, livers, hearts, gills, kidneys, all kinds of interesting structures. Now, in this kidney, they have a structure which is called the glomerulus. Now, this is a nice little filtering machine, and the blood goes and pumps in there, and the pressure is high, so it filters the liquid out, and the liquid gathers over here and is removed. You remove the salts, and then you urinate it out. Very nice structure in the kidney of the fish. Now, fish in the sea have a big problem because their salt concentration is lower than that of the sea, so they're constantly losing water by osmosis. So now, this structure to them is a calamity. So what they do is they switch it off, and it's deactive, and it doesn't work. So fish in the sea have structures in the kidneys that they never use. Why would they develop a structure that they never use? And science is constantly battling with this idea. Now, did fish evolve in freshwater or did they evolve in saltwater? Well, the sea is so much bigger, they must have evolved in saltwater. But if they evolved in saltwater, why have they got a glomerulus? A fish in freshwater has another problem. Its salt content is higher than that of the water in which it lives, so water is constantly moving in by osmosis. It has to get rid of it. If you drink 5 glasses of water, one after the other, eventually you have to run where? Because the kidney is pumping it out through your glomerulus. So a fish in freshwater needs that structure. But some fish have so deactivated the structure that if you take it from the sea and you pop it into the freshwater, it dies. Others have managed, like the salmon, to switch it off in the sea and switch it on in the freshwater and can swim up the rivers and into the sea and do all these interesting things. But most of the fish in the sea cannot use it at all. It's a total oxymoron for them. Isn't that interesting? So this tells me that if all of them have it and most of them don't use it, then maybe conditions were different in the past. Does that make sense? Maybe all was fresh water, and salt water as we know it today is a consequence of the subterranean water, which is often high in salt, that came up during the flood. Very interesting. Now there's a lion. Obviously that is a carnivore. Yes, he's a great killer. You know that lions have been raised vegetarian in zoos, many of them, and that they are highly docile when they are raised vegetarians. And what is interesting is animals that are raised vegetarians, carnivores, live longer, much longer, and have less disease. Do you know that the vets will tell you not to feed your cat milk because it causes kidney failure? And these carnivores, the strongest one, gets to eat first. And when they catch an antelope, what do you think the numero uno lion will eat first? He opens up the stomach, he rips that open, and the first thing he eats is the contents of the rumen. So he's actually getting all those plant materials and vitamins and things into him, and he is then the strongest. The rest get everything else, and they are slightly less strong. Of course, he eats the other things as well, but he survives better on these things. So having found these things out, I actually did quite a fair amount of research in my laboratories with my students, and I sometimes drove my students nuts with the things I asked them to do because they couldn't understand why someone would want to even do things like that. There are a tiger's teeth, and it has like blades over here that act like shears cutting something. Now, that's perfect for cutting meat, and the canines are perfect for killing organisms. That is correct. But the same cutting is also perfect for cutting tough plant material. So it could be used for either. It doesn't mean that it had to be used for what it is used. Well, here's a parrot. It's called the key parrot. Lives in New Zealand. What does he eat? Well, he actually digs up the root of a particular plant. And then it breaks this root with a sharp, strong beak, and that's his diet. And then one day in New Zealand, they were doing housing complexes. And what did they do? They just ripped all the trees out and built houses. And all of a sudden, the diet of this key parrot was no longer available. And guess what happened? It died out? No. It changed its diet. What do you think it ate? It actually used this beak, which is like a blade, to kill sheep. It climbed on the back of a sheep and would rip open the back of the sheep and feed its way into the sheep from the back and eat the fat around the kidney. And it became a pest and killed so many sheep that there was a hue and an outcry. New Zealanders love their meat. Don't mess with their meat. They're the biggest meat-eating nation in the world. And what happened? Well, very quickly they decided, well, we better plant these trees again. So they planted all these trees. And when the diet was back, guess what the parrot did? It wasn't interested in the sheep anymore. So the original food source, if that had not been there when some enterprising first person came to New Zealand, and let's say this creature was killing other animals, wouldn't he have believed, well, he's designed to do so, yes or no? Obviously. I'll tell you that that beak is capable of 10 tons of pressure. You put your finger in there, he'll take it off with one bite. Gone. Isn't it possible that this creature has the equipment to kill, yes or no? Certainly has, but what does it use its beak for? Cracking nuts. That's what it uses it for. But if the nuts weren't there, wouldn't it eat something else? Well, parrots are probably there to look cute. Here is a pacu, and there's a piranha. This is a ferocious meat eater. That's a very close relative, the pacu, and that eats only seeds that fall into the water. Now, what if the earth was suddenly not yielding what it did before, and there weren't the varieties of seeds to feed also the piranha? Well, maybe you change your lifestyle and become a killer. There are, in fact, species of pacu that have teeth very similar to piranhas, and piranhas have been known to eat the seeds as well. So they weren't originally necessarily designed to be what they are today. Here you have all kinds of interesting creatures like chipmunks and ground squirrels and all of these, and they eat seeds and plants. But what happens when acid rain destroys their forests? And the seeds no longer are as abundant as they were before. What will chipmunks do? They will actually eat roadkills. They will actually go and eat dead animals. Were they designed to eat dead animals, yes or no? Obviously not, but they can certainly change if the times change. So animals like shrews that are now insect eaters, insectivores, bats are basically insectivores, but some eat nothing other than fruit. So obviously the capacity to eat something else is there. These are herbivores. Obviously they are designed to eat only plant materials. Do herbivores sometimes eat something other than plant materials, yes or no? Would an antelope go and eat a dead animal, yes or no? Well, the answer is actually yes. You find in desert environments, like in the Namib, for example, where you have antelopes, and very often the season gets very dry and there's not enough food around, and then the calcium needs of the animals change, they will actually go and gnaw at carcasses and get calcium and other needs from these, which they would not do under normal circumstances. You see, creatures change according to the circumstances. Rodents are very interesting. They will eat plants, but they are coprophags. That means they will eat their own excreta. Rabbits are coprophags. They pass the food twice through their intestines because maybe it didn't yield what it did originally, and now in the fermentation which takes place in the cecum, they have a problem with that because they have to recycle it, and so they are coprophags. So we did a little experiment because the scientists were saying, well, that's all fine and well, but a lion is not only different in terms of its teeth, it's also different in terms of its intestine. You see, a carnivore generally has a short gut, and lions and dogs and all of these, the gut length is approximately 6 times the trunk length. Whereas in a human, for example, it's 15 times the trunk length. And in a herbivore like a cow, it's 22 times the trunk length. And so I was wondering whether diet could affect the gut length, because this was used as an argument. So I said to my student, fine, let's do a study. And we did a study with plant and animal diets, which we fed broiler chickens. Now, you know that in the industry, they feed the chickens. Some chickens get fed fish meal. Some chickens get fed what they call poultry byproduct, which is the feathers and the heads and the other things crushed up. And some are fed grains. So there are different feeds in these chicken industries. So what we did is we took a complete plant protein diet, and we took a diet that contained animal protein, for example, fish meal as part of the diet. And then we also tested the effect of antibiotics. So we took a plant diet, no antibiotics, and a diet with antibiotics, because antibiotics would affect the bacteria. And we wanted to know, what is the effect of just changing the bacteria in the organism? Would that affect the gut length and the anatomy and all of those things? So we did the same with the animal diet. And so we had 4 different diets. What did we find? A is plant diet, only plant food. B is plant food plus antibiotics. C is animal protein in that food. And D is animal protein plus antibiotics. Now, as far as the carcass mass was concerned, no difference statistically. So it really didn't affect their growth very much in terms of what we did. Gut mass, whoa, there was a difference. All of a sudden, those that had only plant food had bigger guts. When we added antibiotic, it became smaller. When we added animal protein, it became still smaller. When we added antibiotics to that, it became still smaller. Very interesting. Gut length. So we actually took these chicken guts and stretched them out and then measured their length. People thought we were totally nuts. But this is the result. The gut length, when it had only plants in the diet, was the longest. That's interesting. So there was more space to absorb food. When we added antibiotics, there was a significant drop in gut length. So obviously, when the bacteria died, the gut wasn't as happy and it didn't develop as it did before. When we took meat protein, in other words, fish meal, added that to the diet, the gut length was still shorter. When we added antibiotics to that, it was still shorter. So just the diet alone affected the gut. That is why if you have a dog, for example, and this dog is becoming diseased, and he has all kinds of problems like gout and all of these pains from old age, then you can put your dog on a healthier diet, more plant protein and plant foods than the other. First, the dog goes thin. And then after a while, after a few weeks on this new diet, he starts picking up and he's perfectly normal. Why? Because the gut has probably regenerated some, and he has got more absorptive sites that have developed. So within one generation, you can get that. How much more so over several generations? So there are quite a few publications up which show that gut length is related to what you actually eat. Antibiotics, I believe, should be used when you are sick, really sick only, and avoidance would be the best. To sum up for you, I would like to propose the following. The world was perfect when it was created, and there was a food source for every single creature under the sun. Then sin came in, things changed, food sources declined, many animals went extinct, those that could adapt to something else did. But that doesn't mean they were designed to be like that in the beginning. Those that eventually had no other option but to survive in other creatures became the parasites. But they weren't originally designed to be the parasites. So now with this new knowledge, put yourself in Darwin's shoes. What would you say? I would say, wow, one day the lion will eat just like the panda bear. His food source will be restored, and he will eat what he was designed to eat because it will be there again. One day, all that we see today that reminds us of pain and suffering and all of these things will be gone, because the earth will be restored and it will be made new. And I have no scientific reason whatsoever to doubt that what God said is true. And unlike Darwin, who looked at the dark side and said, there is no love here, I can look at the dark side and say, things have changed because of sin. And to remind us of sin, and to create a hope in us for a better world, so that we might look to God and ask God to cleanse us so that we can be part of that new creation. It's just a different outlook using the same information, and the choice is yours. You can walk through the field and you can study the thorns and the thistles, or you could choose to look at the rose. The choice is yours. You can look at the dark side, you can look at the light side. God has left everything there for us to remind us of the beauty of the past. But he has also permitted the negative to create a hunger for something better. Choose.
Now with the last with evolution is about dinosaurs, I was one that always felt iffy about dinosaurs. I was like, I don't doubt that they existed. I don't doubt that we had bigger, more variety of animals that existed. But what I doubted was that the ferocious nature, it just seems so chaotic. Like, God, why? Like, you mean to tell me if I was dumped into that era, I wouldn't stand a chance with the dinosaurs? It just doesn't make sense. And from the beginning of the earth, he created humans, and Adam and Eve were civilized, okay? It just didn't make sense with the Christian belief that I had and science. So I was like, okay, if science is right, then the Bible is wrong. If we evolved the way science said we evolved from, apes and stuff like that, and there was dinosaurs that was just running around ripping people to shreds, then the Bible is wrong, and God created uncivilized beings and animals that lust for blood and thirst and to eliminate people. It just doesn't align with the Bible. But there's so much evidence out there that this just was not the case with dinosaurs, and we were lied to about that. And anyone who, again, speaks against that is censored, is crushed, and is silenced. But the facts is, whether you like it or not, it just doesn't align with the Bible.
Now let's go to the dinosaurs and all these interesting creatures. Well, here was an article in Time magazine about dinosaurs. Surprise, just about everything you believe is wrong. Well, that's nothing new. What did they look like? What were they? Did they give rise to birds, as is being told in the world today? Here's a sort of artist's impression of the Mesozoic period with all these creatures running around. Did they die in hot water? How did they die? Why did they only exist here in the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous? Why are they gone now? This is a typical tree of the dinosaur evolution, starting with the amphibians, and then how they all evolved, and there are all the modern ones sitting on top of the tree. Is this true, or is this conjecture? It's inference, conjecture, but it's not based on the fossils. So how did they get that? They had all the creatures, they're all in these layers, they take them, and then they put them together. Is there anything leading up to a stegosaur or any one of these, a brontosaurus or a tyrannosaurus rex or a triceratops over there? Is there anything leading up to it? Yes or no? No. When they're there, they're there. That's it. That's what you got. This one over here, the terrible Tyrannosaurus rex. Now, what happened to him? Was he a vicious carnivore? What did Jurassic Park do with this creature? Everybody was running around screaming in fear. Is that correct? Because this vicious carnivore was going to destroy everything in its path. Why is it a vicious carnivore? Because of its teeth, right? Now, if you look at this creature, you have to remember a few things. This was a giant animal walking on two legs with tiny little hands in the front. If it had to catch something, with what would it have to catch it? With its front little paws, and it would have to bend down and try and catch it with its mouth while this creature was trying to run away. Now, there's a law in science which determines what can be a carnivore and what cannot be a carnivore. You see, an elephant would make a very poor carnivore. Why? Because it is too huge. It is too bulky. It has too much momentum when it is running. Can you imagine an elephant trying to catch a gazelle? And the gazelle is going, the elephant is going, and the gazelle goes, and the elephant goes, for another 5 miles, makes a U-turn and tries to come back. Forget it. They will be useless as carnivores. So what do? They eat plants. I could still envision an elephant being a scavenger, maybe, but would he get enough to eat? It would be a catastrophic life if even a fox becomes as thin as a wreck from trying to find enough food. Isn't that right? So large animals like these, just by sheer body mass, would be relatively useless carnivores. And then those teeth. Those teeth are in very shallow grooves. So they are good for crushing, like shredding machines, crushers. But holding on and ripping out, without teeth, it would not be very effective. So were these creatures really what we make them out to be? Fresh T-Rex bone. This is in the journal Science. It was like looking at a slice of modern bone, but of course I couldn't believe it. I said to the lab technician, the bones, after all, are 65 million years old. How could blood cells survive that long? You see, we found bones with blood cells still in them intact. Could they be millions of years old, yes or no? These are questions which boggle the mind. Maybe these creatures didn't live so long ago, and maybe these creatures were not what science would have us believe them to be. If you go to a museum of natural history, any one of them, this is what you will see. Dinosaurs running around, and what are they all doing? They're all ripping each other apart, isn't that right? They're all ripping each other apart, bleeding and blood gushing, one screeching and running while the other one is taking a bite out of the side. That's what you see out there. Here you see another one. These comes from the British Museum of Natural History. This one being attacked, and you have much blood and gore and ripping. And the displays that you have the blood around the face and the blood around the feet and all of these things. And these things are all depicted as highly vicious. Do we have creatures today that have short little arms in the front and big legs at the back? Yeah, we have kangaroos. They're great carnivores. Have you seen them running around killing everything? Blood all over the place? No, you don't. The anatomy is just not suitable for that. So what is the story over here? Is it really like that? You had tiny little dinosaurs like this one. Some dinosaurs were just the size of a chicken, not very big. Did you know that reptiles continue to grow? And they get very, 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 very old. If you take tortoises, for example, if you have a tortoise that's a few days old, how big is it? It's about that big. It's about that big. And if you come back in 300 years, if you survive that long, how big would it be? It would be about that big, right? And so on the Galapagos Island, you have huge tortoises. And what if you came around 1,000 years later, how big would it be? Whew, it would be a pretty big thing, right? And we have some very amazing creatures today. Here is one of them in display in the Museum of Natural History in London. You can see by the scale of things. I mean, these things were huge. This creature was probably a swamp creature, walking in swamps and feeding off the swamps. And here is a triceratops, obviously a plant feeder. Look at its mouth. It's exactly like any creature that would eat plants. Tortoises have mouths like that. So this was a plant creature. So it had these vicious horns on the top. Why? Well, you see, it had to protect itself against what? Against all these vicious carnivores. And it had this huge defense mechanism to do its job. That's what science is teaching our young people today. That's the image that we have with us. Hello? What's that? That's a chameleon. And it has 3 horns on the top. That's a modern triceratops, a small one. Some chameleons get pretty big like this. Some are very small. We have all kinds of varieties. And these horns over here are to protect it against all the vicious carnivores all around. True or false? Very false. What are those horns for? Those horns are there to look sexy. When a female looks at those horns, her knees just begin to wobble. And that's what happens. Now, this is a very common thing in nature. If you take reindeer, for example, what do reindeer look like in the breeding season? What does the male look like? He has these huge antlers. He is so impressive, right? And the bigger they are, the cockier he is, right? And then the breeding season comes and the males, they test their horns and the females watch and are very impressed. And the guy with the biggest antlers, like the youth today with the best hairstyles, they get the ladies. That's the way it works. Everything works like that. What happens after the breeding season to a reindeer's antlers? They fall off. Now, what if they were really there to keep all the vicious carnivores away? He would be in big trouble for most of the year, right? Nothing to protect himself. This is a mindset that is being placed in the minds of men that does not have a basis in reality. And these creatures were probably no different to the lizards and the creatures that we have today, just bigger. Everything was bigger. We find dinosaur eggs, yes, and then we have museum depicting them in their little nests breeding out, pretending that everything is very normal, and we can find the eggs, yes. But how do we find these eggs in the fossil record? They are all washed into great washes. They have all been buried in catastrophic flood deposits. There is no such thing out there as a natural setting that would pretend to be anything like it is today. Dinosaur footprints all over the place. If you look at the way in which the impression was made, then it appears that in the past the animals all walked uphill, because most of the footprints seem to go upgrade. You can't look at the topography today. You have to look at what it was like, because there could have been uplift and downlift. So when these animals made the impressions, they were making impressions in mud, and they all appear to be running uphill. Why would animals always run uphill? What makes animals go uphill? Maybe rising floodwaters? Is that a possibility? So there are over 100 published theories about the extinction of the dinosaurs, ranging from the fascinating to the absurd. Do any of them explain the death of the dinosaurs? What are the facts? Why so many theories to explain something that is perfectly obvious? All of them that we find are buried in huge floodplains, washed into position, even orientated by floodwaters. Any eggs that there are washed into position, but none of them died in a flood. Does that make any sense? Doesn't make any sense to me. He says there's no such thing as a simple animal that became complicated. It's a myth. When we look at the fossil record, everything is complicated. At the same time, what do we have in the world today? Scientists agree, world faces mass extinction. Quarter of the mammals face extinction. Only 10% of the big ocean fish remain. That's what the world is knowing. This is a fact. So everything is disappearing, which explains why everything was more in the past than it is today. Doesn't that make sense? If we are slowly eradicating things by extinction, sooner or later we'll have what? Nothing left. Natural selection is doing a great job of removing everything from the planet. So if we look into the past, it was a far greater world than we have today. And science is distorting the picture. It's not what it seems to them. These creatures were just around. So young folks, if the world were ever restored to what it was, what a delight it would be. How many creatures there would be. If you look at the fossil record, we had strange creatures in the past that don't live today. But what is an ammonite? An ammonite is a highly complex squid-like creature that lived in a shell and swam through the sea, just like modern squids without their shells. So there you have these creatures. They're complex. There's nothing simple about them. These are the trilobites, depicted as ancient and the first organisms to evolve, which is rubbish, because we saw that everything was there at the same time. And what are they? They're arthropods, highly complex. They don't live today, but there's nothing simple about them at all. They tunneled. They had all the equipment that they needed. This is Nautilus, ancient so-called living fossils. That's the living form. That's the fossil. They were identical. Nothing has changed. I used to be an evolutionist. I used to believe in evolution. In fact, I hated God. I wanted nothing to do with God. And I had no option but to be an evolutionist, because I left God out of the equation. I had no option. And so I wasn't being a hypocrite. I just was looking for a solution. And that was the only option available. Even as an evolutionist, I had to change from gradualism to equilibrianism, punctuated equilibrianism. Why? Because the fossil record didn't tell me what it should be telling me. It just didn't do it. It cannot do it, as you saw from the scientific quotes themselves. I had to change. So what's the big deal? If everything was there from the beginning, there's no difference between that and creation, except that you've left out what? God. That's it. That's the only thing they've left out. God. They're calling it sudden burst of evolutionary creativity, and they've just left out God out of the equation. That's it. So is there a God or is there not a God? Well, you decide. This is the Welwitschia. Welwitschias are plants that just don't die. They just grow and grow and grow until they are very old. So we have giant Welwitschias in Namibia, in the deserts, and they tell us something about how long things have been around. If you go to the oldest trees in the world, the bristlecone pine is famous for it. The oldest ones around, how old? Well, the oldest Welwitschia around is between 4,000 and 5,000 years old. The oldest bristlecone pine, how old is that? Between 4,000 and 5,000 years. Some years ago they said, 6,000. But then they realized that they were not dealing accurately with the ring structures, and so today everybody agrees 4,000 to 5,000 years. That's it. Or if you go to the Redwood National State Park, what do you find? Giant trees, huge ones. And these are first-generation forests. You see, this tree is amazing because its bark is fireproof. So even if a fire sweeps through the forest, the trees survive. There's a first-generation forest, so there's nothing that was there before. How old are the oldest ones on the planet? Between 4 and 5,000 years. There is no river that's older than between 4 and 5,000 years. Doesn't exist. There is no plant that is older than between 4 and 5,000 years. And you will say to me, but whoa. We have archaeological evidence. We have evidence from the nations, from China, that everything has been around for much longer than that. Yeah, when I was a kid, they taught that. When we did Egyptology, what did they say? Egypt was around for how many thousands of years BC? And then, as the evidence piled up, what has happened to those dates? What has happened to them? What has happened to the dates in China? What's happened to the dates in Egypt? What's happened to the dates in Mesopotamia? What happened to them? They got shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. And now, if somebody dares say 3,000 BC, by the way, that's just 5,000 years, they will put a plus minus in front of it. Why? They know that in a couple of weeks' time, the time will come down. Why? You see, in the past, they used to put the kings all sequential. Let's say that one reigned here, next one there, 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 and they had a long list of kings and a long time. Because they knew this king reigned for so many years, that one for so many years, long time. And then one day they discovered, oops, yeah, it was father and son ruling at the same time. Or father and 3 sons ruling at the same time. And the time went new, and then the time went new. And so eventually, we're down to a very interesting scenario. Take the history of Europe. Man, if we've been around for millions of years, why can't we only trace the history of Europe to a few decades, centuries, perhaps a millennia or 2 BC? Nothing there before. England, there was nothing on that island, 2000 BC, nothing happening. So really, we're dealing with very interesting phenomena. And I believe that these scientists are dealing with one basic problem. And that is a denial of divinity. That's it. That was my problem. Denial of divinity. It has nothing to do with science. Science has moved into the realms of faith. And you can choose for yourself whom you want to believe. That choice is yours. But you don't have to be exposed to lies in order to make a theory fit.
So now that we got those out of the way, question 2, I know question 1 had 3 parts. Question 2 is the Bible was written by man and cannot, well, it's not really a question. I put it in a written format, but yeah, it's the Bible was written by man and cannot be trusted. Also, the stories in the Bible are all fiction and made up, which is something that I battled with a lot, is not really believing that how could the Bible be real? We didn't experience this. The story of Jonah, it all sounds so mythological and just does not make sense. My human limited brain could not process that. And I understand how someone who thrives on logic, because there are people that it's easier for them to have faith because they move more on emotions, feelings, and vibes and stuff like that, right? But there are people that purely moves based on logic. They purely move based on understanding of that. And the Bible doesn't shun them for that, because the Bible says, the Lord says, come, let us reason together, right? The Lord would not ask you to do that if he just wanted you to blindly follow and blindly have faith. He does not mind when we ask questions. I asked some tough questions to the Lord before, and he took his time to educate me. And I do not like to look down at people that want a logical reason. It has to make sense, right? And the Bible, if you're looking at everything that we're told and understand, we think it's just written by men that wasn't inspired by no God. And how can we prove this? How does archaeology or anything prove this information?
This dig season, I traveled to 5 different biblical sites within the borders of ancient Israel to ask archaeologists a simple question. In their excavation work, do they use the Bible as a tool? The first stop is the ancient city of Gezer to visit with dig director, Dr. Stephen Ortiz. Do you use the Bible as a tool in your archaeology here at Gezer?
Yes, we use the Bible as a tool. The Bible mentions Tal Gezer a lot, and so we use the Bible to help us reconstruct the history. So we use the Bible and we use the archaeology to reconstruct what happened here.
Jericho is famous as the biblical city where the walls came tumbling down. I stopped there to visit with archaeologist Dr. Titus Kennedy.
In the book of Joshua, it says the Israelites destroyed Jericho and they burned the city. Right here, we can see some of the toppled mud brick wall and clear evidence of a fire destruction.
So, Dr. Kennedy, do you use the Bible as a tool in your archaeology?
Yes, I do. I find it extremely useful in not only locating sites, but helping us understand the historical record better.
The largest ancient site in all the land of Israel is Hatzor.
Taking away the Bible from archaeology in this part of the world, between the 10th and the 6th century, is depriving archaeology of its soul. You're left with nothing. You're left with a lot. You're left with walls. You're left with stratigraphy. You're left with finds, but the soul is missing.
Next up was Dr. Aaron Mayer, who is the dig director at Gath, the hometown of Goliath.
Biblical text is an important source for learning about the ancient land of Israel in biblical times. Of course, we use the Bible to try and understand what happened here. If we didn't have these written records, we would have a lot harder time understanding what it is we find.
In Jerusalem, excavations are currently being conducted. by archaeologist Dr. Shimon Gibson.
The Bible can be illuminated by archaeology. There's no doubt about it. When you're excavating a place like this, which is referred to in the sources as the Upper City, and when you come down on remains which date from the time of King Hezekiah, who's mentioned in the Old Testament, then it all comes alive.
There is no question that the Bible is an important tool in archaeology. Flinders Petrie is considered the father figure of the field of archaeology, and in his book, 70 Years in Archaeology, he tells the story of a discovery that he made in Egypt back in 1896. Petrie wrote, "To the astonishment of the rest of our party, I said at dinner that night, this will be better known in the world than anything else I have found." I'm standing in the mortuary temple of the pharaoh Merneptah. And this is where Flinders Petrie was excavating when he found this inscription. Today, you can go to the Cairo Museum and see the real stele that this is a replica of, the Merneptah stele. The inscription of Merneptah dates to around 1210 BC. The inscription describes who Merneptah and his army fought with in Canaan. The translation reads, Canaan is plundered, Ashkelon is conquered, Gezer is seized, Yanoam is made non-existent, Israel is laid waste. So on this side is the most famous name found in this entire inscription, which is right down here, the name Israel. And this is the earliest mention of the name Israel found outside of the Bible. This means that in 1210 BC, Israel is described as a people that has not yet formed into a nation and therefore is without a king. Ashkelon, Gezer, and Yanoam are followed by the city-state symbol. These three city-states were ruled by kings. There is no city-state symbol shown for the name Israel. Instead, the symbol for a foreign people is shown. According to biblical chronology, the date 1210 BC falls in the Judges period, where we find in the book of Judges this repeating phrase, in those days, Israel had no king. Found in the Bible over 2,400 times. And this wasn't even the first time that had been found in an inscription through archaeology, but this was the earliest mention of the name Israel outside of the Bible. This is yet another example of the details in the Bible being verified through the details of an inscription dug up through archaeology. I am standing on an ancient mound in the Jordan Valley, east of the Jordan River, and this is a site that is known locally in Arabic as Tel Der Allah. A discovery was made here which refuted the skeptics who claimed that the Bible is mythology. So the earliest writings in the Bible are the first 5 books, and these are the 5 books of Moses. And they were written at the end of the 15th century BC. And because they're the earliest writing in the Bible, they're often targeted by skeptics who are saying that they're largely mythology. And this discovery provided evidence that the Bible is not based on mythology, but on history. And so in the books of Moses, one of them, the book of Numbers, Moses talks about a seer named Balaam, son of Beor. And at this time, the Israelites are camped out in the Jordan Valley on the plains of Moab. Balak, king of Moab, sends messengers to Balaam, son of Beor, to summon him to come and to put a curse on this people, Israel. And Balaam comes, and as he goes to speak a curse on Israel, a blessing comes out instead because the Lord is speaking through him. Excavations took place here at Der Allah in the 1960s, and they were directed by H.J. Franken. They found the remains of a monumental building which they interpreted to be a temple. And the walls of this temple had collapsed in. And as they were excavating down through these collapsed walls, they noticed pieces of plaster that came from the inside of the wall. And they noticed that on some of these fragments of plaster, there was writing in black and red ink. And the inscription that they preserved is one of the feature displays at the National Museum of Jordan in Amman today. So in general, this inscription is very fragmentary, but the first line of it is very clear. And when translated reads, the sayings of Balaam, son of Beor, the man who was a seer. So compare that, for example, to Numbers 24:3 that says, and he spoke his message, the prophecy of Balaam, son of Beor. So the same person, the same seer that is talked about in the Bible is also now found independently of the Bible through archaeology, through the excavations in this site, found in an inscription independent of the Bible. So what does this mean? It means that the places and the events and the people that the Bible is talking about are real, and that the truth claims of the Bible are not based on mythology, but on history.
Also, one of the reasons why I definitely personally believe that the Bible is real is because it is a historical book that archaeologists uses. It is one of the main books that archaeologists use, whether they're atheists or not, they use it because they know the accuracy of placement of different places and kingdoms is just pure accurate. It has never been proven to be a lie. You can search high and low, you won't find it. Not only that, but it's for prophecy. Prophecy, the book from the book of Daniel to the book all the way down to Revelation. Prophecy was since Genesis in the garden. Jesus was giving prophecy to Adam and Eve. Okay. Jesus was in the Bible since Genesis. A lot of people today, modern Jews, etc., they deny the existence of Jesus in there, but there's so many prophetic Bible verses on there. But this video is not about that. So comment below if you'd want that for me to show you how many times Jesus showed up in the Old Testament, even undeniable, and how prophetic him coming was, because many religions believe in the first 5 books of the Bible, but the rest they kind of reject. And even the first 5 books was nothing but a testament of Jesus Christ. But that's for another video. Let's get back to focus. But so many prophetic events have come to pass time and time and time again. And that's for another video also. You can comment below if you want that. I'll add it on the list. But these videos will probably take me some time, so bear with me. If you want me to break down all the historical prophecies that have happened from the Bible up until today and the modern day, where we say that we are living in the last days. The Bible has yet to been proven as a lie. Everything that it has said has been true. And also with the flood. I love talking about the flood because there is now proof that they found where Noah's Ark was. That is very interesting. And now there's a documentary on Netflix called The Apocalypse, where they talk about the global flood, and it's all scientific, not Christian based, although they call it apocalypse. The scientist, the main archaeologist / scientist that, the documentary is following, is several episodes. It's not Christian based, I'll just say that. But I watch it because, hey, here he's acknowledging. Of course, towards the end, they get a little, I wouldn't say occulty, but try to honor other gods from different deities and stuff with it. But we as Christians know this is all proof. Now there's undeniable proof that the flood happened. Hallelujah. The flood actually happened. And that shows you that whether you like it or not, every event that happened in the Bible is historically accurate. And archaeology today is doing nothing but proving it. And it's making the academia community very upset. But I love to see it.
Now, where do we find the greatest evidence of the flood today? We find it under the ocean. If you go to the Pacific Ocean, for example, there are canyons under that ocean 4 times bigger than the Grand Canyon. Now, canyons don't happen underwater. So what does that tell us? That was once where? On top. That was once land. So is it possible that the great cities with all the myriads of human fossils are perhaps buried in sediments under the ocean? Where do legends say the pre-flood world is today? Have you ever heard of the legend of Atlantis? Where do they say that is? Under the ocean. What does occultism teach? Where were the ancient people and where are they today? They are buried under the sea. That's what occultism teaches. If you get the great books of Masonry, for example, the great articles that they have, they will tell you that they were under the sea.
So let's move on to question 3, which is the Bible and Christianity copies and plagiarizes other older religions. And I'll give my opinion with this real quick. My opinion, which is Satan is actually the true counterfeit, right? With prophecy. Let's go back to Genesis. From the fall of men, the Lord stated that the serpent's head will be crushed, right? God was already giving from the beginning the redemption plan and how the world will end into this. The enemy, Lucifer, already knew that this is how things will end. There will be a son. God will send his son to die on the cross to redeem everybody. There will be that happens. Since the garden, he already knew this is the plan that's going to happen. So if you were Lucifer, what would you do? Would you not go ahead and try to formulate different religions that have the similar plot line to say that, nope, this was here first, because people were not writing and recording at that time just yet. There was no cell phones or anything like that. So if you create a religion, just giving an example, I'm not going to give an example as to not offend anyone, but any religion that has a son that comes and save humanity or the savior of the world, etc. Since the enemy tries to have a counterfeit of everything that God has, would you not go ahead and formulate these different religions so that it can have the similar plot line of the original story that's going to happen? That's just how I thought of it. And when you think of it that way, you think if he was here since the very beginning, he's very ancient himself, and he's very mischievous and manipulative and lies, and is the author of lies. He knows how to concoct the most elaborate lies even ahead of time to create doubt in humanity. The Bible is the only holy book that has been proven and is backed up by science and archaeology, period. It's the only one that is not mythical, period. I know that may be offensive, but you can find faults in every other holy book. But the Bible, no matter how much you go deeper into it, you just won't find fault in it. It's perfect. Let's move on to question 4, which is Christianity is a white man's religion. And as a Black woman, a Black person in the Black community, we get that a lot. Me saying, oh, it's the white man's religion. It started slavery, etc. And now that we know in this new age, that has been debunked also. Christianity has been here way before the Europeans took it and did what they did with it. We had it first. We just had it first. That's just how you see it.
The white nationalists push Christianity down your throat.
Christianity was in Africa before Europe. The Ethiopian Bible is older than the King James Bible. Thank you. The argument that colonialism brought Christianity to Africa is completely wrong. Because Christianity was already in Africa before Europe. Christianity is not a European religion. Whoa. Christianity is not a European religion. Why did the people there choose to accept this religion? Some of the values being propagated by this religion already align with their values.
In the northern highlands of Ethiopia, archaeologists have made a groundbreaking discovery. The oldest Christian church known in Africa, revealing early Christianity's reach into the ancient Aksumite kingdom. The historical figure credited with laying the foundational teachings of Christianity, as supported by historical and scientific research, is Saul of Tarsus. He is recognized for his pivotal role in shaping early Christian doctrine. Before the Council of Nicaea, Christianity faced severe persecution under Roman rule, culminating in the Diocletianic persecution. However, in 313 AD, Emperor Constantine legalized Christianity through the Edict of Milan, granting Christians freedom to practice their faith. What is Ethiopia's role in the founding of Christianity? An excavation site, Beta Samati, not only provides valuable insights into early Christianity's presence in Ethiopia, it also reflects the enduring Christian faith in the region. The largest ethnic group in Ethiopia today is known as the Cushitic people, named after the ancient region of Kush, which corresponds to modern-day Sudan during the time of the pharaohs. The Cushitic people were the early inhabitants of the Arabian Peninsula and established the Kingdom of Sheba in what is now Yemen. Historically, what is now Ethiopia was part of eastern Sudan. In Ethiopia, the population includes groups with Sudanese origins, such as the Oromo and Afar, and those of mixed Sabaean Arab descent. The Sabaeans, from the Kingdom of Sheba, intermingled with the forebears of the Arabs, who arrived in the area later. When the Sabaeans moved to Ethiopia around 3,000 years ago, they continued this pattern of intermingling. This mixture is a reason why languages like Amharic and Tigrinya are classified as Semitic languages, rather than being indigenous African languages. The term Ethiopia originally referred to the region known today as Sudan, deriving from the Greek word Aethiopius, meaning burnt face or black. This designation evolved to encompass broader Africa, and was used in medieval Europe as a general term for black people. Ethiopian tradition holds that the Queen of Sheba and King Solomon of Israel had a son, leading to a lineage of Ethiopian kings with Jewish roots. Similarly, the Falasha, or Beta, Israel, Ethiopian Jews, are believed to have originated from Israelites. Until the lions have their own historians, the tales of the hunt will always glorify the hunter.
We had the message first, okay? And I know it was whitewashed a lot down to the image of Jesus, and that turns off a lot of people, whether you're from the Middle East, whether you're from Asia or you're Black. The fact that they whitewashed Jesus and made it so historically inaccurate how he looks and all of these things, like all the prophets, Paul and stuff, they did not look like that. It turned off a lot of people that are historical figures. Like, okay, if this Jesus actually existed, there's no way he would have blue hair and blonde eyes. And you have shows. They will never do a show with a Black Jesus, and that's with a darker skinned Jesus, a more historically accurate looking Jesus. They will never do that because it makes white people uncomfortable, and that's unfortunate. And I'm a very inclusive person on this channel. Y'all know this. I mean no harm by saying this. But if you are white or you're Caucasian and you're watching this, ask yourself, would you feel uncomfortable with seeing a Black Jesus or a darker skinned Jesus? How would that make you feel internally if when the sky opens up and the sun was coming in all his glory with his Father and all the angels, and you saw a Jesus that did not have blonde hair, blue eyes, white skinned? How would that make you feel? That was something that was just too much for a lot of lighter skinned complexion people. And so they took it and made it their own. And it's unfortunate because a lot of people have turned away from the word, because how can the most oppressive people through history, oppressive group, have this is the image that Jesus chose to have? And that's just let's be honest, let's be honest, let's not be. Neither would it make sense for the prophets Paul, these old men with bald hair, white, whatever. It just didn't make sense. Christianity was there first, since Ethiopia, the oldest Bible, in fact, is from Ethiopia. I'm going to also read this article from africathegospelcoalition.org, which all these links are in my description, where it talks about African Christianity thrived long before white men arrived. Over 685 million people in Africa are associated with Christianity in some way. But amongst this broad acceptance, there's a murmuring that the religion of the colonists shouldn't have a place in the continent anymore, that Christianity isn't African. Except that's not true, for Christianity was present in Africa 1,000 years before the first European colonialists arrived on African shores. Were you aware of that? A whole millennia before any European nation docked their ships, Christianity had been flourishing in Africa. The gospel was already spreading in Africa by African heralds. Early African Christianity, apart from Rome, Eusebius even wrote that the gospel writer Mark came to Alexandria as early as 43 AD. But are you aware that in 330 AD, King Ezana of Ethiopia declared Christianity its national religion? To become the nation's official religion, it's likely that Christianity was already established in the country a long time before. For comparison, it took 2.5 centuries for Christianity to become the official religion of the Roman Empire. Going further back, we have, forgive me with the pronunciations of these names, okay, you already know. Irenaeus of Lyons wrote in 180 AD, he wrote that Simon Bacchus preached the coming in the flesh of God in his homeland of Ethiopia. And going back further still, Luke writes of the first century conversion of an Ethiopian high official in Acts 8 verse 26 to 40. Could this official have started the first church in Ethiopia? We'll probably never know the side of eternity, but from all this we can say that Christianity has been established in Ethiopia for at least 1,600 years, possibly even 2,000. Many of the colonists were not aware of this heritage. While some Ethiopian monks did make it to the Council of Florence in the 15th century, when the Portuguese landed in Ethiopia in 1493, they found to their shock that it was already full of churches. It should have been unsurprising because Africans have been shaping Christianity since the earliest times. Sadly, missing from many people's understanding of Christianity is that a significant number of the church fathers were African. Christianity has been active in Africa since the 1st century. Therefore, it's inaccurate to call it a white man's religion. Christianity is a religion that started in the Near East and traveled to both Africa and Europe at the same time. I'm not denying that colonialism spread Christianity in Africa. It often brought with it the baggage of European culture, giving the impression that Christianity is European. However, while we know this impression is inaccurate, the African church is still processing it today. Take Western European art as an example. Jesus is often painted as a blue-eyed, pale-skinned European. In contrast, Jesus and his original disciples were 1st century Levantine Jews, most likely brown-eyed, black-haired, and olive-skinned. They weren't Western Europeans or white. Christianity was not a religion brought by the white man to Africa. It's not even a white man's religion. Christianity is a religion of the world, and Africans were some of its earliest worshippers and theologians. We need to celebrate this history and help people understand that the gospel is for everyone, whatever their culture or background, and given this history, especially if the culture or background is African. Long may the name of Jesus be lifted high in Africa. And this was written by a white man, Andrew Butterworth. He leads the eldership team of God First Church East Rand in Johannesburg, South Africa. And he previously worked as a medical doctor, but now works as a full-time pastor. So he wrote this. It's not even from a black person that wrote this, but it's unfortunate how black people refuse to learn this. And they go back to African spiritualism and ancestor worship, etc., and Isis worship, Horus worship, and all of these things to say, oh, those are the original, what we worship, and this and that. And the white man this and that, when it's all false. It's all false. It's all false. It is a lie. It is a lie. And I want you guys to know that back then, way back then, and archaeology is starting to prove that. There's a lot of debate now, but I give it probably 2-3 more years, and it's going to come out that all people originally were black back then. That's just the root black, whether you like it or not. There was 2 sets of people. Eventually, there was the pure Caucasian, blue-eyed, blonde hair, pure white. And then there was black. Mixing so much created diversity. That's starting to come out. So if you are white, but you have green eyes and brunette hair or red hair, somewhere in there you got black blood in you. You mixed with, And if we can believe it, Adam and Eve were our first parents. We all came from the same gene, the same people. And long after the flood, we had Noah, his children, and their wives. So then we all came from them. So we're all technically the same people. But diet, climate, etc. alters things, changes things. Haitians, a lot of Haitians in America will look different than Haitians in Haiti. People don't always believe me when I say when I was in Haiti, I was about 3 shades darker. I look completely different. Over time being here, I start to change diet and everything. Place would change that. Hair texture. My best friend, for instance, before she went natural, because we used to put relaxers and stuff. And then just when she shaved it all off and started to start fresh, her natural curl pattern was a little looser and just more manageable for her and different than what she remembers as being a child. It's the same for me. And we're like, what happened? Our diet has changed. The water that we're using to even wash our skin, to wash our hair has changed. So much has changed that it even changed down our texture. And this is what we talk about with the evolution, which it's the theory of evolution, which we don't believe, but how diet affects even animals' intestine. There's a lot of factors that changes things and how we came to be, but we all essentially came from the same place. All this division, etc., sucks, but nonetheless, we know for certain, just based on the archaeology of where a lot of these biblical places are, it just would be impossible for Jesus to have been blonde hair, blue-eyed, or for any people or any group around there for them to have been that. And a lot of these places were conquered a lot, even biblically. The Israelites went into slavery. They got slavery. They kept rejecting God. They were conquered a lot, and there was replacements. There's other people that came and took those lands and are being seen as the modern day Israelites. But that's historical. You go look through that. But the original people of those lands, the original Israelites where they were, because of their lack of obedience, they are scattered all across the earth. And the Lord says when he comes back, he will gather all of his people, all of the tribes back to him. But they were scattered because of their disobedience. And other nations came and spoke. And there are nations that hate when you talk about that. But it's just the reality. The Bible does not lie. And the Bible has proven over and over again that this is facts. And you just cannot argue it. Question 5 is, Jesus was a cult leader, which is the last one, and was not the Son of God. A lot of this has been happening, where a lot of people are saying there's movies that is blasphemous. Recently, Jay-Z, I think, is one of the creative directors or producers, I believe, don't quote me, behind one of these movies, but the book of whatever. Movies like that is kind of showing Jesus as this culty, like blasphemous. If you haven't seen my video on, how we misuse the name of the Lord, and how Hollywood they have this agenda against the name of the Lord and mocking the Christian faith. Check out my playlist, All Things Spiritual, which I will pin in the comments. And check out all videos previously that I've done on these topics, etc. More will come. There's so many evidence now that Jesus literally died. He was here. He was present. He died. He rose again. It just is what it is.
Today, I'm going to be talking about the archaeological evidence for crucifixion. In the New Testament, we have a detailed account of Jesus' crucifixion. And for example, in Acts 2:23, it says of Jesus, they put him to death by nailing him to the cross. In 1968, in the northeast area of Jerusalem, a tomb was discovered and excavated. And inside this tomb was found one of these limestone bone boxes called an ossuary. And inside of the ossuary were found the remains, according to the excavation report, of an individual male between 24 and 28 years old. Both of the ankle bones of this individual had been pierced by an iron nail, and this undoubtedly was a case of crucifixion. In fact, one of the heel bones of this individual had a nail still embedded through it. However, we know from the archaeological evidence that his feet were nailed to either side of the beam of the cross through his ankle bone. In 1970, another tomb nearby this first one was discovered and excavated, and inside of it also was found an ossuary. And inside of this ossuary, 3 iron nails were found with bones still fused to them. He studied them and determined that this was further evidence for crucifixion, that this individual, who he determined to be about a 25-year-old male, ended his life nailed to a cross through through his hands, and it was his hand bones that were still fused onto these nails. In this case, they're not sure how his feet were attached to the cross, and so we have the illustration based on the archaeological evidence showing the upper part of this man's body and how his hands were nailed to the cross. So when we bring these two illustrations together, we get this composite view of a crucified man from the 1st century AD, the time of Jesus, based on archaeological evidence of what crucifixion looked like at that time, and it matches perfectly with the descriptions that we have in the New Testament of Jesus' crucifixion. Again, Acts 2:23 says that they put him to death by nailing him to the cross. We also have, after his resurrection in John 20:25, the disciple Thomas, who felt the nail marks in his hands where the nails were. And so this image that we have of Jesus nailed to a cross through his hands and his feet is supported by the archaeological evidence. So there's an area that's located to the southwest of Jerusalem and about 5 miles east of Lachish. In this area is an archaeological site called Beit Loya, and it's in one of these caves that has a fig tree growing out of it. You actually have to climb through the leaves of this fig tree to get down into the cave, where you can see on the side of this limestone wall this huge Greek inscription. In fact, there's a shot of me walking between the camera and the inscription that shows you just how big this inscription is. It starts with a simple cross, a very early version of the cross, followed by 2 Greek words, all of them in uppercase Greek letters. The first word is a name, and it's translated Jesus. The second Greek word is translated present. So this inscription is translated Jesus is present. The inscription dates to the end of the 2nd century AD, or maybe into the beginning of the 3rd century AD. So we're talking about the late 100s to early 200s AD. Very early inscription. It is, at the very least, one of the earliest inscriptions mentioning Jesus. So now, why is this inscription underground in a cave? Because it dates to the time period when there was intense persecution by the Romans against Christians. So the church often met literally underground, as they did in this cave. Why did the inscriber inscribe Jesus is present? Because Jesus didn't stay dead, but being God, he was raised from the dead on the 3rd day. Now, I can't tell you how many lectures I've sat through or how many articles that I've read that have made the claim that there is no archaeological evidence for Jesus of Nazareth. And this simply isn't true. This inscription at Beit Loya isn't the only one, but it is very significant because, being around 1800 years old, it provides direct archaeological evidence for the historical Jesus. Sure that many of you know that the name of the God of Israel is Yahweh. And the name Yahweh is mentioned in the Old Testament 6,823 times. And it's been found several times in inscriptions through archaeology. But today I want to talk about the oldest Yahweh inscription that's ever been found. Now, I first learned about this inscription when I was reading a book by a well-known Egyptologist named Donald Redford, and he was writing about a site called Soleb, which is today located in the country of Sudan, but in ancient times, it was part of the kingdom of Egypt. The pharaoh Amenhotep III built a temple and made a list of his foreign enemies, and the name of his book is Egypt, Canaan, and Israel in Ancient Times, and so he was discussing these inscriptions when he wrote, "For half a century, it has been generally admitted that we have here the name of the Israelite God, Yahweh. And if this be the case, as it undoubtedly is, the passage constitutes a most precious indication of the whereabouts during the late 15th century BC of the enclave revering this God." I was shocked. You mean to tell me that there is an inscription mentioning Yahweh that dates to the end of the 15th century BC? That's amazing. So I went to the library. I found the Soleb excavation report. This site was excavated in the 1950s, and there was the temple, and there was the inscription and the translation of the inscription. The inscription is written in Egyptian hieroglyphics. The first hieroglyph is the hieroglyph for land. The next 3 hieroglyphs sound out the word Shazu, which is translated nomads, land of the nomads. And then the last 4 hieroglyphs sound out a name. The first hieroglyph is the Y sound, then the house hieroglyph is the H, the noose is the W, and the bird is the A, the way. So together in the excavation report, they translate this name as Yahweh, land of the nomads of Yahweh. These are the ones that Amenhotep III is bragging about defeating. This man with his arms bound behind him, and then the name of that people, where they're from. I've come a very long way to see this inscription, which from the Egyptian hieroglyphics reads, "Land of the nomads of Yahweh." It dates to the end of the 15th century BC. It's over 3,400 years old, and that makes it the oldest mention in an inscription of the name of the God of Israel. Here we have a perfect example of something that was found through archaeology, correlating perfectly with what we read in our Bibles. In this case, according to biblical chronology, the Bible says that the Israelites are wandering in the wilderness for 40 years at the latter half of the 15th century BC. Here we have an inscription from the Egyptian pharaoh Amenhotep III that dates to the end of the 15th century BC. The Bible describes the wandering Israelites, the nomadic Israelites, as moving around with their God Yahweh, who is with them by day in a cloud, at night in a pillar of fire. And so what better way for the Egyptian pharaoh Amenhotep III to describe this people than the way that he does right here, nomads.
By now, no one's refuting really the existence of Jesus. Instead, they're just saying, oh, well, we acknowledge that he was here, but he was a prophet. You know, that's what they're saying. He was a prophet like Muhammad or whatever. He was not the son of God. Instead of denying his existence, because now it's irrefutable in the world of science and the world of archaeology, instead, let's just deny that he was the son of God. And of course, a lot of people will fall into that because it's just impossible to fathom. The son of the God that made us came and died for us here, rose again. This whole Bible thing just sounds really weird. I want to end this by saying, first of all, if you like this video, please thumbs up, leave your comments below, questions. And if you want me to do a part 2 for more questions that you guys have, I will, as well as other requests. I will do more in depth. These videos are very exciting to me. I was nervous about them, but I don't know. I'm getting really excited to do these type of videos for you guys. But I'll wrap this up with the occult with my own testimony about why I personally believe in Jesus. I always say on this channel, and it's something that I will repeat till the death of me, that if I were not Haitian, I would be a strong atheist, and I wouldn't really care to look into the Bible and stuff like that. I wouldn't have cared. The Lord knew what he was doing by making me Haitian. He knew what he was doing. I love it. I'm grateful for it. Reason why, for me, I have a very analytical brain, and I love to research, and I love to have a proof for tangible things at all time. That's just my brain ever since I was a little kid. You would not believe it. I wasn't always a girly girl. Now, even as a girly girl, people don't understand why I have so many archaeology books here. Like, even my Bible is a whole archaeology Bible. Let me show you guys, just in case you want. So I got this Bible from Amazon. I'll put the link in the comments, but it's an archaeology Bible where it gives you trying to see if I could put clips instead, but it gives you like explanations of the places there. And at the bottom, like if you go at the bottom here, they'll give you like little footnotes explaining certain things in the archaeology perspective. And it's crazy how archaeology proves it. But what I like also, in the beginning of every chapter, it gives you the theme, what it was like during that time period globally, so you can have like the context of some of the verses, even down to the journeys they have in the wilderness, etc. Like I always tell people, get these books, some of the laws, etc. I just love this. Like for the book of Exodus, it does the same thing, gives you a little concept of even the Egyptians, how they lived, etc., and gives you more of a breakdown of the different cultures and religions of the time period. But books like that, like reading my Bible like that, has helped me to be able to back up. And it's not that you have doubt, because in school, most of the people I used to hang with were atheists, and we used to have a lot of debates. And my only argument would be, as a Haitian, is that, well, the only reason I'm Christian is because I've witnessed demonic possessions in real life, where people's voice would transform, their bodies, they have superhuman strength and like crazy things, you know, people literally transforming themselves, and the name of the Lord, the name of Jesus, fleeing, making these demons flee, you know, casting out spirits in those names, and even being protected. Me, myself, I've had my personal experiences with God, being protected from these things, these demons, these spells that were casted and stuff. This is the reason why I believe in Jesus. Though I didn't have necessarily the answers to debate back with an atheist, if the atheists that I would argue with, they're not Haitian or anything, they still think it's myth. Okay, whatever, it's your mind. The mind is powerful. Yes, people can transform into a whole lizard if they wanted to, just their mind. You know how crazy that sounds? But that would be some of the arguments if you're like, hey, you know, some people really go under the sea for days and do this. There's levels to these things. There's people that, like, All these demons and spirits are fallen angels. That's all they are, guys. They're not these different scary deities that are this. All they are is fallen angels that come in different shapes to deceive men. They can come as angels of light, as beings of light that grants you wishes and stuff, but it's all just to blind you. It's all just to keep you. It's a deception. It's the greatest deception of all kind. And they'll come in different shapes and forms, but all they are is fallen angels. And when you call on the name of Jesus, they all have to flee. That used to be my only argument up until as I got older, I finally decided for myself, okay, that argument aside, let's go into logic and not just your experiences, because you will have people that keep saying, okay, well, that's emotional. Like, yeah, we could explain that through maybe it's mental illness and this person's voice changes when they're going through a psychosis or they're having a mental breakdown or whatever, like explanations that they'll give, right? Or they'll label different spirit possessions as multiple personality disorder. When a spirit takes someone, they rip off their clothes, they're running into the street bare with nothing on, and they sounding different. They're attacking people and having different personalities. Science, psychology even, has labeled a lot of these things as mental things, and we know them as in Haiti as that's not what it is, but they will explain it in a way where you feel okay and they medicate you and you calm down. But the deception is these spirits want you to believe that. Of course, that's calmed down with medication. We don't want you to believe that we can actually do that to people, but they take pleasure in destroying the creation and the people of God. And when you serve God, he just keeps you undefiled from these beings, right? So because I was an analytical person and I wanted to know things for myself, I used to ask God some bold questions, and I still do. If I don't understand something yet, like I'm reading and I'm like, oh, I don't like this. I don't understand this. Lord, why this? I'll pray about it and he'll answer me. It might not be today and it might not be tomorrow, but he always answers me through whatever means, whether it's a dream, whether it's through the own scripture and it aligns with the scripture. He always answers, whether it's through a sermon or breakdown or something, whatever it is, he answers. And this is why the Lord says, if you seek me, you will find me. I challenge you, if you're watching this, you may not know too much about the Bible or anything like that. But what I challenge you is pray. Say this prayer to yourself. And I pray this over you guys because I pray over who watches my videos. Even if you don't agree with me, God brought you here. So the message for you was received, okay? Because I pray over that. But pray that, Lord, I am seeking you. Help me to find you. But don't just sit here and not seek it all. Like you're not aiming. I don't say to just read the Bible, but get into archaeology, get into science, and ask yourself these questions about God. How did it all come to be, you know? And then align that with your Bible. There's things you might not understand in the Older Testament, because the Older Testament was what would trip me up a lot with some practices that I thought, I don't understand this practice. It seems weird. A lot of the stuff I just didn't understand in the Old Testament. But you still pray about it. Don't let it limit you from continuing to read, and I promise you eventually the Lord will answer. And I want to do a series on the Old Testament too, some things that are questionable, because even in Haiti, where there's a lot of witchcraft, etc., you have a lot of people that are like, well, this sounds like witchcraft in the Bible. This sounds like they were doing witchcraft and stuff. There's answers to all of those things. I'm not going to do a 4-hour video, obviously, for you guys, but I promise you, if you subscribe and you keep up, I will do videos on these subjects for you and we'll dive deeper into them. But I challenge you to seek God and you will find him. He keeps his promises. If you seek him genuinely to learn, to really know the truth, have a spirit open to the truth, and don't just seek like you want to know because you want to disprove. Like there's people that are seeking but to disprove or with this agenda. But generally open your heart to finding. He will come to you. Knock and he shall answer. Seek and you will find. Okay? But Jesus is not a cult. It's been here forever. Believing in him, he's been here since the beginning. It's not a cult. It's blasphemous how people talk, and it's blasphemous how these films are having us believe this more and more. But the name of Jesus is the most attacked. Look at how this young lady just lost her life because she rebuked an officer in the name of Jesus. Look at that. The name, it's something about the name Jesus. And I call Jesus Yahweh. I do not typically use the name Jesus, but for the sake of everyone watching, is Jesus. The reason why with the Yahweh, I'll just leave that as the last thing because I'm looking and this is getting so long. But I believe that my name is Karine, okay? Karine in Creole, but in English it's translated as Karine. There's something about hearing my name Karine from people that makes me feel home, safe. That's my native tongue. This is what my name is. That's my name, right? And Korean, I still respond to it, but sometimes it can sound so foreign, especially if the Haitians around me that always call me Karin just out of nowhere call me Korean. I'd be like, it just sounds so foreign, right? There's something about calling the name of a person what it is in their native tongue that just resonates with them so well. And I really do believe that Yahweh, I believe that once you know the name, it doesn't make a difference, pray to whatever, because the name of Jesus, as Jesus made demons flee, you know who you're calling on, you know? But it's just a little thing I'll add that in future videos, if I use the name Yahweh, some people will align that with different religions and different things. Like when you say that, it's just simply his name. And historically, that's what he was called by his people. And we pray in that name, we'll call in that name. It's holy. We will not use it in vain, etc. And wow. That's just all I have to say for this video. I'm sorry that it's so long, but of course, these questions, I could make this even longer if possible, but I'm not. Comment below what other videos you guys would like from me to do on this topic. I hope you enjoyed. Share with somebody that has similar questions, or share on your Facebook pages, your Instagrams, whatever. Let's grow our little community. I love you guys so much. Thank you for supporting. I'll see you on the next one.